Now, conversely, on the other side, the Confederacy did have some advantages too. The first one is that they had very experienced military leaders, which I'm going to talk more about in a second. This means that the generals, or the people who were leading the troops out in the fields, in the battles, when things were getting really bloody and violent, these leaders were generally very calm and very well trained. They had gotten a high level of education, many of them at this place called West Point, which I'm going to tell you about in a second, which made them very capable leaders so that they could try to protect their men the best they could during battle. Now, additionally, more people in the South had proper training when it came to combat skills. So in the North, while they may have a much bigger army, many of those soldiers are not as well trained or as experienced, meaning that maybe they don't know how to use a rifle very well. Maybe they're not in as good physical shape. Maybe they just don't understand the way that battle tactics or strategies work. On the South side, however, many of the soldiers were very capable and knew how to fight because they had experience in the army from before the Civil War. Finally, the last advantage for the South or the Confederacy would be that they were able to take on what we would call a defensive strategy. This means that they were fighting most of the battles on their land, in their territory. If you know your territory, you know the best places to hide, you know the best places to escape, and you know the places to avoid that might be dangerous so that you don't get surrounded by enemy troops. This geographical advantage was a big one for the South and allowed them to continue fighting for a long time throughout this really bloody conflict. Now at this point, you're going to hit pause on that video one more time and go ahead and answer question number 4. Also, quick apology, I said answer questions 3 and 4 last time I said hit pause. Hope that didn't cause any confusion. Now is the time to answer question number 4. Okay, now that we're back together, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the leaders of the Civil War. Now, the first one we can see up here is someone who you've already read about pretty extensively, and you know his name, you know his face, the infamous Abraham Lincoln. Now, Mr. Abraham Lincoln was someone who had a reputation as being very level-headed and very calm. He got respect from a lot of other people in the North, especially people who were Republicans, because generally speaking, he didn't get too stressed out about really big decisions, or at least he didn't seem to. When you're looking for a strong leader, a lot of the times people look for the quality of being calm so that you show that even in the face of danger, that you can get your country through a difficult time. Now, Abraham Lincoln is a fascinating character, and we're going to learn a lot about him over the next few weeks. But one thing that is really important to note is that at the beginning of the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln was not an abolitionist. He was opposed to slavery and was especially opposed to slavery spreading into new states and territories like Kansas. That being said, he wasn't ready to say, let's eliminate slavery right now, which if you were an abolitionist from the North, that might make you feel kind of not so great about Abraham Lincoln's ideas and policies. If you're going to be a Republican and represent the North going into a civil war, it seems like you should be ready to say slavery needs to end, slavery needs to be over. But Abraham Lincoln was careful at first because he knew that a lot of his supporters also had mixed feelings about totally ending slavery, and he was trying to play a political game where he could try to maintain support of both people who wanted to get rid of slavery and maintain support of people who weren't really sure if they were ready to get rid of it yet. At this point, you can go ahead and hit pause on the video and then move on to question number 5. Great, now that we're unpaused, let's move on to the next leader of the Civil War. The second person we're going to talk about today in terms of leadership is this man named Jefferson Davis. Jefferson Davis was the president of the Confederacy. Now again, the Confederacy is now the official name of the country that is the South, right? So we're talking states like Texas, Florida, Georgia, the Carolinas, and more. All of those states, when you put them together, make up the Confederacy. And they decided that their president would be this man, Jefferson Davis. Jefferson Davis was from Kentucky, so he was kind of from a state that was right between the North and the South, which a lot of people liked because it made it seem like maybe he could connect with people from the northern part of the South as well as people from the deep South, places like Louisiana that are really, really far down there. He was a man who had a lot of military experience himself. He went to West Point. We're going to come back to West Point again in the next slide. I'll just quickly tell you what it is now. West Point is a very famous military school in New York. This is where many of the top generals, even still today in 2020, will do their studying for college before they go into military service. Basically, anytime you hear that someone has gone to West Point, they have a really good reputation in the military and will likely go on to be in a leadership position instead of just fighting in the fields. Now, Jefferson Davis was a slave owner. He owned a cotton plantation after his time served in the military and is rumored to have owned up to about 110, 113 slaves. So obviously this is a man who supports the system of slavery, and if you're someone who's from the South and you want to hold on to this horrible institution that is slavery, you're probably going to support Jefferson Davis because he's someone who has a lot to lose if the Civil War goes away, because he wants to hold on to his slave labor too. Generally speaking, as the war goes on, Jefferson Davis's reputation will get worse and worse. You'll see why. I'm not going to say too much about that now, but let's just say that if you plan on winning a war, it is helpful to have at least 1 million soldiers compared to 2.2 million soldiers on the other side. At this point, hit pause one more time and you can do the second part of question number 5. Okay, moving on. The next two people we're going to quickly talk about here are the two main generals of the Civil War. The first person that we're going to talk about is this man, Robert E. Lee. Now, Robert E. Lee is the head general for the Confederacy, again, the South. Robert E. Lee is a man from Virginia and also is a man who goes to West Point in New York to get his military training. He was someone who was highly respected by people not only from the South, but a lot of people from the North really respected Robert E. Lee, mostly because he was such a skilled general. Now, on the other side, his main enemy is going to be this man, Ulysses S. Grant. Ulysses S. Grant also went to West Point, kind of like Jefferson Davis, kind of like Robert E. Lee. But instead of serving for the South, like those other two men, we're going to see that Ulysses S. Grant is the head general for the Union, or the North. Now, Lee, again, is someone who is going to be the more effective military leader. He is going to be a man who wins a lot of really tricky battles because he knows military strategy, military tactics, and the geography of the South very well. Ulysses S. Grant will have a lot of victories too, but one thing you're going to see over the next couple weeks is that when we talk about victories in the Civil War, especially for the North, they always came at a really high cost. These major battles that we will go through over the next couple weeks generally are very bloody and have very high body counts for the Union. Now, if you have a lot more men on your side, you can afford to lose more soldiers and still can technically come out the winner. That's going to be the case with a lot of the battles that Ulysses S. Grant leads, and we'll see that these two men will be the last two people to meet from the Confederacy and from the Union by the time the war is over. At this point, you can go ahead and hit pause, move back into that document, and move on to question number 6. Okay, moving on. The next topic we're going to talk about, and this will be one of the last things we address before we wrap up today's lesson, is this idea of what is called emancipation. Emancipation means that you are freeing someone or something from either slavery or prison. Someone has been trapped or has been in a system that has totally taken away their freedoms or rights, and then if they are freed from that system, they have been emancipated. I'll just give you a quick example sentence. Immediate abolitionists hope to emancipate all people who were enslaved in the South, even before the Civil War started. When we move into our next lesson this week, which will be about something called the Emancipation Proclamation, this word emancipation or emancipate are both really important to know the definition of if we're going to take away the full meaning and main idea of that speech again, which is called the Emancipation Proclamation. At this point, you can go ahead and hit pause one more time, move back into this document right here, and answer question number 7. Okay, folks, we're about ready to wrap up, and this will be our last slide. So that question that you just answered here, it says, what do you think Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation will say? In this prompt or this question, you need to think about what the word emancipate or emancipation means if we can try to make meaning out of what the Emancipation Proclamation is truly about. Once you've made this prediction, there's one more question in that packet, or excuse me, in this document right here, which is number 8, where I'm asking you to write 2 questions about any of the topics we reviewed today. Please feel free to go back through the slideshow and go through the topics that you think are most challenging to you, and please write questions about those topics. Once you've done this assignment, the next assignment, like I said, that you'll move on to is the Emancipation Proclamation assignment, which is also posted in Google Classroom. Make sure you're reading carefully. Make sure that you're annotating each part of the speech as well. And as you're going through, make sure that you continue to be thinking Lincoln. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll catch you later.